You are listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly ReQua, interviews veterinarians from across the nation, answering your questions about your pet. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for listening. Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's bark_wag.com.
Today we're talking to Dr. Laura Brown, a veterinarian and owner of Green Tree Animal Hospital in Libertyville, Illinois, as we discuss ticks. Yuck. They are out there, and we want to know what we can do to protect our dogs. Dr. Brown, welcome.
Hi, Polly.
Thank you for taking the time to talk about ticks with our dogs. They're just so gross. So can you just tell us a little bit about what a tick is and why they're out there, and how will a tick affect my dog?
Okay, sure. And I agree with you. They are gross. They are these little ectoparasites that feed on mammals and suck their blood to survive. So they are found actually year-round, which is one point that I think people fail to remember. But we do have ticks in certain areas in the Midwest all the time, all year round. They typically like the 40-degree temperatures, so spring and fall are kind of peak seasons, but some of the smaller stages of ticks can last through the winter, especially some of our winters have been a few mild days in the middle of January and February. We'll have like 40, 50-degree temperatures, and they'll pop up again. So they typically live in tall, grassy, wooded areas. Brought to the areas they ride along on ticks and the little critters like squirrels and raccoons, and those guys can bring them into the area as well.
Okay.
You know, we are really close where we live. We're close to the Wisconsin border, and Wisconsin has a whole lot of problems more than we do with serious amounts of ticks, maybe because of all the woods and outdoor living that they do up there, maybe.
Okay. And what can they cause Lyme disease in a dog as well?
They can. Ticks carry all kinds of diseases. Lyme disease is probably the most common one that people have heard of. They carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever. They carry another disease called anaplasmosis. But Lyme disease is a disease that our dogs can get. That's what we worry about here in the Midwest. And it is spread through the bite of a tick. People can also get Lyme disease. Lyme disease actually started on the East Coast, so Connecticut, Lyme, Connecticut's where it started. So the East Coast has some problems. The Midwest has some problems, more problems than certain parts of, than other parts of the country. Then in the South, that's more where other, like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and stuff like that is in other areas, not so much in the Midwest.
And so what are the signs that a tick has affected your dog?
Well, when people have ticks that you find on your body, for the Lyme disease anyway, it leaves a bullseye behind.
Okay.
In dogs, we don't see that because they're furry, and so we can't see their skin, and we don't usually find a bullseye. But what happens usually within about 7 days to 3 weeks after, so there's a long period of time there where it might take a while for symptoms to show up in dogs. The dogs will spike a little fever, so they'll be lethargic because of that, and usually they get some achy joints, so they'll be limping.
How do I prevent my dog from getting ticks, especially, since most people are outside walking and hiking in the summer?
Yes. So that's the most important thing. I will say Lyme disease is not very common in dogs, even if they have ticks on them. 95% of the dogs that might be exposed to Lyme through a tick bite will fight the disease off all by themselves. So because they also spread other diseases and they're just plain gross, we want to prevent, first of all, and do that so that we don't have to even worry about them. Because if you don't prevent ticks on your dog, then your dog can bring the ticks into the house and therefore then expose you, the people. So the most common products that we have out there are a handful of topical products. So they're liquids that you put on your dog's skin, part the hair and put it on their skin. And it works its way into either their sebaceous glands to be excreted that way, and works for about a month. So the most common ones are Frontline, Advantage are the two biggies that I am aware of. There are some over-the-counter products that you can get to. Hearts makes one, I think. There's some definitely generic front lines. The thing you have to be careful about some of those over-the-counter ones is they can be really toxic, and people can kind of misuse them if they don't read the directions right about the body weight of the dog, and they can be really, really toxic to cats.
Okay.
And people don't realize that and will put their dog products on their cats, and cats can die from some of those products. So it's really important to read the labels. Make sure you're picking the stuff the right size for your pet, and talk to your veterinarian about some of those over-the-counter products. There's a couple newer products. There's two newer products out on the market that are oral, so chewy, flea and tick, both flea and tick products, and they last for a month as well. There's a new one called NexGuard that's made by the same company that makes HeartGuard. And there's another new one made by Zoetis that's coming out on the market soon, and I don't know the name of that one. But there's also another product that's good for 3 months called Bravecto, 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 and it's a 3-month chewable tablet.
Oh, okay.
And then there's also the newer flea and tick collar that is called Seresto that lasts for 8 months, but you have to put a collar around your pet and keep it on them to help for that. Now, some of those collars, and there's a handful of other names out there, are more for tick repellents. So the idea behind those would be that the ticks wouldn't even get to your dog. But you have to remember the collars have chemicals in them, and then if people are touching their dogs, holding their collars, kids are around, those things can be pretty potent. So I typically don't recommend those unless the people are deep woods, camping, and they need some extra strong tick prevention.
Okay. And it's water repellent. I mean, so if the dog's in the water?
Yes.
Okay.
Most of those products are water repellent. I will say, though, for those dogs that swim all summer long and are in the water every single day, the efficacy of the products probably diminishes as they get towards the end of the month.
Okay.
So those are the dogs that I recommend the oral chews on.
So what I'd like to ask you is when you do have a tick on your dog, how do you remove it? So
that's a great question. And it's really easy. You do not have to burn them. You do not have to use alcohol. The best thing to do is grab a Kleenex, put the Kleenex hold on to the base of the tick with the Kleenex, and gently start to pull him out. As you give a little pressure and pull, their mouth parts will release, and you will be able to pop it off.
Yeah.
You'll see there'll be a little piece of skin in their mouth usually when you get the tick off. The reason I say use a Kleenex is because if you squeeze too hard and they're fully engorged, you'll pop them and the blood will pop out, and you don't want to get that on your skin.
Right.
So you want to hold them with the Kleenex to protect you from getting blood on you, and then just gently pull, and they'll come out. They also make these things called tick twisters. They're little devices that kind of hook over the tick, and you kind of turn them a little bit and they twist them out.
And then what do you do with them? I mean, we've always been taught to burn them.
Yeah, and they probably die. I mean, I guess if you put them in the sink and stick a match to them, they probably would die. I always close them up in a test tube at work to suffocate them, and then throw them in the garbage, so they can't crawl out of there. And I did pick a handful of ticks off my own dog at home the other day, and I just put them in a little baggie and threw them in the garbage so they couldn't get out of there.
Okay.
Stepped on them and tried to squish them. They're pretty hard to kill, though. They got a hard body.
And ticks are everywhere. It's not just long grass they can be
anywhere. I know people, get them on their kids get them on the playground at school. I mean, I think they like to live in the wood chips, wherever any of those critters, even birds can carry ticks. So they can they can be in any place where those animals wander around, and then the ticks kind of hang out in the tall grass, and they're kind of just sitting there waiting to jump on the next warm, fuzzy body that comes by.
And they're not like other parasites where they will have babies on the dog.
No, right.
Okay.
One is one.
Okay.
So if you get one off, if you see one, you're good. You get it off, you're done.
We were out hiking last weekend and had the dogs with us, and we were driving home, and all of a sudden one of my daughters started screaming, and I thought, something happened and there was a tick climbing down one of their necks.
Yes.
It was like,
Yes. So I use NexGard on my own dog. So what I did, I took him on a walk on a path that I was suspicious of the ticks. It's a wood chip path. There's some trees, and I let him off the leash a little bit. As soon as I got off the path, I stopped and I brushed him off. He's a golden retriever, so I could see a few of them like kind of on the top hairs.
okay.
And then I made him roll over, and on his belly he had probably 10 walking along that it hadn't attached yet. So I brushed them all off, checked his armpits, checked his groin, checked behind his ears and around his muzzle, and I probably picked off probably 10. Then I walked back home. I was still in our neighborhood, walked home, stopped before I brought him in the house, found 3 more that had burrowed close to his elbows down in by his armpits, and then let him in. I took off, I had all my clothes. I had long pants on and a sweatshirt that day, but I took everything off in the garage, shook it out, threw it in the wash. The next morning I found 3 dead ones in his bed. So
wow.
I didn't get them all. So that's why it's important to get them to check your pet before you put them in your car, before you bring them in your house. After you've been out and about, you can probably prevent a lot of that from happening by just looking and getting them before they attach.
So that's actually, I've never even thought of that, because having children, they're not doing that, obviously. So
right.
What happens if a tick does get in the home and falls off? They can only walk. They're not
right. They only walk.
Okay.
If they've been on your pet that has a flea or tick product, either the topicals or the oral, and it's touched your pet, usually they're going to have exposure to those products and they're going to die eventually.
Okay.
So, but it's worth tick checking your kids and tick checking your pets.
Sure.
Before they come in the house from being outside, especially this time of year. But really, it is all around year. That's why we recommend the products all year round.
Yeah, okay, so there's not. It used to be that you really only did the tick treatment from April to November, but I guess now we're having such mild winters.
We just have had such mild winters often. We have some really harsh days and it's really cold and stuff, but the ticks just hibernate until it gets to be about the 40s. And if we get a couple of 40 degree temperature in a row, they'll pop out. And so it's not unusual to find a couple in January, February. So it's just I think it's just more preventative and conscientious. And so then you don't forget to start your products either by April, or if we have a warm day in March. So I think it's easier to remember to get them on them every month. Do something once a month.
Well, that's interesting, because heartworm medicine now is can be in multiple months, and so now you can just do the tick.
Yes, I think the heartworm preventative really should be called parasite prevention medicine, because it does prevent heartworms, which they get from mosquitoes, which we don't have all year round, but we have other intestinal parasites.
Okay.
That the heartworm preventatives or parasite preventatives all take care of those other intestinal parasites that dogs are exposed to even when it's winter, because they get exposed to those other parasites from other animal species.
We'll have you back for that one.
Yeah, that's a whole topic by itself.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time, Dr. Brown, talking about these gross insects, and
yes.
we look forward to having you back on the show.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Polly.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-minute Vet Talk.